I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is Genesis Does, and today we are looking at Jesse the Body Ventura's Wrestling Superstars. This is an unreleased Sega Genesis / Mega Drive game that was developed in the early 1990s, and frankly, having played it, I see no reason why it shouldn't have been released. But before I get into that, I'm going to assume you don't know who Jesse the Body Ventura is. Now, I do because I'm a pro wrestling fan from way back. I was a kid in the 80s, I was a teen in the 90s, so I saw pretty much the greatest parts of Jesse the Body Ventura's career, both as a pro wrestler and as an actor. After that, he got into politics and conspiracy theories and other things I'm not going to go into, but let's start with his early life. He was born July 15th, 1951 in Minneapolis, Minnesota. As a young man, his parents were World War II veterans. He himself would go on to be a naval veteran, although he didn't see active combat duty, but I'm still saluting him right now for that because my father is a Navy veteran as well, so much respect to you, Mr. Ventura. After his time in the Navy came to an end, he started hanging out with the Mongols Motorcycle Club in San Diego, and then they got into a turf war with the Hells Angels, and perhaps he knew better than to stick around for that because he left California, went back to his native Minnesota, and he started getting into bodybuilding and weightlifting, and it impressed upon the locals there because that was the home state of the AWA, Vern Gagne's promotion, and he ended up becoming a professional wrestler himself. I'd say he took to it the way a fish takes to water. Some people just have a natural personality for pro wrestling. They can either make you love them or hate them, but either way, they can elicit an emotional response when you see them, and Ventura was very good at that. I wouldn't say his wrestling was necessarily the most technically gifted. Maybe he's not the greatest mat technician or hold-for-hold grappler or high-flying aerial maneuverer, but he had a great physique, had a great personality, and he was great at drawing a crowd, which led him all the way through the Central States territories to the American Wrestling Association that I mentioned earlier, and ultimately he was recruited by the expanding World Wrestling Federation, a territory that had started in the Northeast but had gone national and was quickly swallowing up all of their competition by scouting all of their best talent and giving them better deals and getting cable and television and broadcasting rights in various markets and muscling out the competition. They were basically, how should I say, they were like the Walmart of professional wrestling. They were just going to end up everywhere in every city and nobody could compete with them. Folks tried, the NWA tried, the National Wrestling Alliance tried, and in the 90s, they had a rival in World Championship Wrestling, and these days, now known as the WWE, they have a rival in All Elite Wrestling on TNT. But WWF has, since at least the mid-80s to the present day, where they're known as WWE, been the biggest wrestling promotion. With a few exceptions, they've won and lost some wars, but they are the billion-dollar company today, and Vince McMahon is a billionaire as a result. I'm kind of getting off track here. My point is, Ventura was one of those people they scouted to come to WWF because they saw his charisma, they saw his drawing ability, and they thought, this guy needs to be on our team. Unfortunately, he had some health problems not long after he arrived in WWF. It was discovered that he had blood clots in his legs, and that's not really the kind of thing you want as an athlete, because if they break off an athletic competition, they could go to your heart, cause a heart attack, they could go to your brain, cause a stroke. There's any number of negative outcomes to having blood clots that are going through your body, entering other organs of your body. So he retired from full-time in-ring wrestling, but then he really found his calling, if I do say so myself, because that natural charisma of his would shine through when he was on color commentary. And he was great at providing both perspectives. He could provide the in-ring perspective as somebody who had competed in the squared circle. I use the word competition loosely because we know it's scripted, right? But he had been in the ring and had worked with those people, so he knew what the holds felt like. He knew what the moves were, and he could also call it with his colorful personality and bring some larger than life drama to it, especially when he was paired with Gorilla Monsoon. They were just a natural pairing because Gorilla was so good at giving you the straight and narrow, just keeping it on the level, and Jesse was so over the top and exuberant. He was very flamboyant in his look, he was very flamboyant in the things he would say, and that natural charisma also led to him being a very successful actor. So he did a lot of big movies in the 1980s. I think the one that most people will know best is Predator, but I also enjoyed him quite a bit in The Running Man, which was more of an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, but he has a prominent role in it as Captain Freedom. He's also been in Ricochet, Demolition Man, Batman and Robin. It's been a very successful career for him in movies and professional wrestling. And as I mentioned earlier, he transitioned into politics, became the governor of Minnesota. He's done a lot of things. So it's not surprising, not at all surprising, that with his level of success in the worlds of media and entertainment, that somebody would come to him and say, "Hey, Jesse Ventura, you're a big star. How would you like to have a pro wrestling video game?" Why would you say no to that if you're him? Of course you would. You come from the world of professional wrestling. You made a living in it before you got into acting and politics and all these other things. Why wouldn't you want kids to play a game with your name on it? And there was even a local tie-in for him on this one because DreamWorks was a Minnesota-based publisher of video games. Not to be confused with Steven Spielberg and Hollywood and all that. This is the same DreamWorks that put out games for Sega Genesis like Wings of War, Shove It, Fire Shark, Trampoline Terror, etc. So they had the perfect muscle. They could come to him and say, "We do this for a living. We know you because you're from Minnesota. We're from Minnesota. Let's work together." And so they found a Japanese pro wrestling game called Thunder Pro Wrestling Retsuden, and all they had to do was localize it. They had to put Jesse the Body Ventura in it, change the Japanese to English. Other than that, they had a game ready to go with a full roster of characters. It's very easy to control. The moves are crisp and fun to hit. It's great, honestly. I have a hard time saying anything negative about this one because I love a pro wrestling game where you just pick up the controller and instinctively know what to do. You hit the C button to make a cover, you hit the B button for your moves, you hit the A button to run the ropes. All of it just flows naturally from hitting the D-pad to move yourself around the ring to locking up with your opponent to prepare to hit moves to stomping on them when they're on the mat or diving on them with an elbow. Whatever you want to do, you just sort of naturally figure out how to do it. So I'm guessing Thunder Pro Wrestling Retsuden is a pretty awesome game in and of itself. And man, it was just such a easy home run for these people at this point. Human Creative had already developed the game. DreamWorks was ready to publish the game. The license for Jesse Ventura couldn't have cost as much in the 90s as it probably would today. I mean, it wasn't cheap, I'm sure, but definitely not what he would charge for it now. So why didn't they do it? They had the game ready to go. They had it ready to be approved by Sega as of March 2nd, 1992, which is when this prototype is dated. It was a localized game, and as far as I can tell, it was a finished game. This was a ready and should have been published game. It was ready to go. I just don't understand. They maybe just got cold feet and thought Jesse Ventura wasn't a big enough name, but he was a pretty big name even back then. Hollywood, pro wrestling, he'd done it all at that point. He hadn't even gotten into being the governor of Minnesota or anything else yet, so I would have just gone ahead with this if I was them, and I just don't know. But it's a fun game, and it's a prototype, so go to hiddenpalace.org and download it for free and play it yourself, because it's out there, it exists, and it's a very good game. Not not necessarily better than like WWF No Mercy 64, but that's a Fire Pro Wrestling game anyway. It's just another reskin, which is what this is. It's a reskin of an existing game, and a very good one at that.